liberal politicians often seem to be leading the charge to impose sanctions because they think the US should support human rights and because they see sanctions as something they can do without military intervention. How do sanctions fit into liberal politics, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, that relates to a chat that I've seen also here that was asked by Hester Eisenstein about the press, the media, and its role with regard to talking about sanctions. And I do think that they tend to support it all the time. It is a very, it's a very hard one because we're all human and we're all compassionate and we have empathy where there appear to be human rights violations. I think what people tend not to see or willfully overlook sometimes is that the things we select as a human rights violation, for example, chopping up a journalist, you know, and what we don't see, what we see or what we don't see are underlying that. You really want to ask, what is our relationship to that country? What is our interest in that country that we are now imposing sanctions? It is usually more than human rights. Human rights have been weaponized. They're real, they happen, we feel them, we feel for the people, but we have to understand they're weaponized and look underneath it to see what else is really going on. I'm sorry, Molly, I saw you wanting to answer that too.
No, I can come in after if you're finished.
Yes.
Okay. I think the other point to remember is that, in fact, sanctions create human rights violations, ostensibly coming in to defend a particular human right, often erodes people's basic human right to life, to a minimum standard of living at the very least, to be able to have health care and education. All this can get enormously disruptive by sanctions that are imposed. So, and I think that Representative Levitt, pointed that out. We sanctioned North Korea, and then we've worsened for political and ostensibly in part for political and legal human rights violations, and we have created a humanitarian disaster.
Can I pick up on this question and say that I think the fight against sanctions, and especially coming out of a kind of liberal interventionist tradition, is part of the fight against liberal war making. It's sort of two sides of the same coin, because as we've said, as the speakers have said tonight, sanctions are a form of warfare, and they have real consequences for a number the people who are subject to them. So it's part of the struggle is to transform the liberal approach to U.S. foreign policy, which we're engaged in, many of us in this forum tonight. And I think the other thing that I would add, what I see really important about this Ilhan Omar bill, aside from addressing sanctions, is that it's part of the effort to assert democratic control over U.S. foreign policy. And it's analogous to some of the struggles taking place around the AUMF battle in Congress right now. Congress has abdicated its responsibility, its democratic responsibility in foreign policy. So we need to push our representatives to reclaim and represent us and take out war making, whether it's sending in troops or drones or sanctions, out of the hands of the executive, who's exercising these powers in a kind of unrestrained and out of control way, I would say.
But I think the battle, I think getting congressional oversight and control is important. But the battle is also to persuade the people who are in Congress not to support sanctions regimes, because for so many, it seems a way to target countries that they don't like Iran or China or North Korea, or because, as I suggested, it seems like a cheap and easy way of enforcing the U.S. Will and saying what should and shouldn't happen, and no American lives are at risk. And in this, it really is, I think, a counterpart to drone warfare.